All right. So in the last class, we were discussing about we did question number one, question two, particularly microeconomics wala jo hai for the October November 2025. तो अब हम इसका question number three देखते हैं. Let's break this down. So the question says कि with the help of a diagram, explain the difference between movement along the production possibility curve and a shift in PPC curve, right? So basically shift और movement along के दरमियान हमें एक difference बताना है. So this would be the part where the knowledge is completed, and then we have to consider whether the decision to produce more of one good would always incur an equal opportunity cost, right? So equal opportunity cost को हमने explain करना है और क्या ये हमेशा होगा या नहीं होगा. So whenever we have a question on production possibility curve, we are going to start with the definition of PPC. So production possibility curve represents all maximum combinations of two goods and services that an economy can produce with all its resources fully and efficiently employed in the current technology and factors of production. Right, so we start with the definition of PPC. What PPC is, it shows all maximum combinations of two goods or services that an economy can produce with its limited resources, given that the state of the technology or factors of production abhi change nahi ho rahe. Right, we have to explain the difference between the movement along the curve and a shift in the PPC. So, and we have to use the diagram. So remember, whenever the diagrams are explicitly required, there would be marks reserved for them. So movement along or shift दोनों की हम diagram बना सकते हैं. So there are two approaches to this which you guys can take. The number one approach is कि आप एक ही diagram बना दो to show both effects, or you can make two separate diagrams to show both effects separately. So I'll go with the latter one. So we'll make a simple PPC. So capital goods and consumer goods. So on the y-axis, we represent capital goods. On the x-axis, we represent the consumer goods, right? And we show the reallocation of resources. Okay, movement along the PPC. क्यों होता है? So let's K1, C1, and similarly C2 and K2. And let's call this point A to point B, and we make arrows. अच्छा, जब भी diagrams बनाने, a few things that you have to be very mindful about. The first thing is कि axis को लाजमी label करना है. Some people don't touch the curve with the axis. ये भी make sure करना है कि PPC is touching the axis. You don't make the diagram where the PPC is not touching the axis, and always use arrows to show the effect, right? And then for a shift in PPC, we will make a similar thing. So capital goods on the y-axis and consumer goods on the x-axis. And we will show a shift in the PPC. Again, shift specifying here, so we'll make both an outward shift and we will show an inward shift. Let's call the first PPC initial as PPC A, the inward one B, and the outward one C. So once we're done with this, ये अब हमारे diagrams बन गए. Now we just need to explain them in one short paragraph and explain what they essentially represent, right? So let's write down the explanation. So सबसे पहले let's call this the right panel as diagram 1 and the left and the right panel as diagram 2, right? So now we'll write an explanation. So we'll say a movement along the PPC occurs when resources are reallocated between different goods. So इसका मतलब क्या है कि reallocation of resources या movement along the PPC तब होता है कि when you are not changing the quality or quantity of factors of production, you're just changing the way that the resources are being used, right? So it occurs when resources are allocated to a different use rather than their quality or quantity changing. This would lead to economy producing more of one good and less of another, right? So बेसिक हमने अब हम इसको diagrammatically explain करते हैं. So I'll say कि in the diagram one above, the movement from point A, where K1 capital goods were produced and C1 consumer goods were produced, to point B represents reallocation of resources. In order to make more of consumer goods, the economy has to reduce the production of capital goods to K2, right? Representing the concept of opportunity cost. And whenever we introduce a new term in economics, we explain them. So, so opportunity cost is the value of the next best alternative foregone. When a choice is made, in this case, it is the units of capital goods given up. Now we'll explain, on the other hand, what does a shift in PPC means. So on the other hand, a shift in PPC occurs when there is a change in productive capacity of the economy. This means that either quality or quantity of factors of production change. If the economy experiences a technological improvement and quality of resources improve, the PPC shifts outward as represented in diagram 2 from AA to PPCC, right? On the other hand, if resources deplete or the quantity or quality of resources diminish, in that case, the PPC will shift to B, right? So यहाँ पे एक चीज याद रखना, in case of a shift in the PPC, there is no change in the opportunity cost. Just that the economy can either produce more or less of one good. Right? Now we need to explain. So we're now done with the first part, which is the difference between movement along the PPC and shift in PPC. Now we have to explain if you always produce more of one good, क्या हमेशा equal opportunity cost exist करेगी, right? So that's not the case, right? So as far as the question, of equal opportunity cost is concerned, it occurs when producing more of one good leads to the same quantity of the other being given up each time. This situation happens due to two reasons. Number one, resources are perfectly suitable for production of both goods. And number two, the goods are homogeneous in resources. Right? अब हम इसको explain करेंगे what this essentially means. Perfect resource mobility means that every factors of production is equally efficient in producing both goods, whereas homogeneous goods mean that the factors of production required to produce both goods are identical in nature and requirement. अब हम इसको एक्सप्लेन करेंगे कि क्या ये चीज इन इन रियलिटी होगी या नहीं. इन रियलिटी रिसोर्सेज, अच्छा यहाँ पे बल्कि उससे पहले वी नीड टू एक्सप्लेन के just add one line. So the PPC in this case will be a straight line PPC. You can put in a diagram, but that's not explicitly required because diagram required थी किसके लिए? You need to explain with the help of diagram. You have to explain this thing. So second part के लिए, even if you don't make the diagram, the marks won't be deducted. ठीक है? So we'll say in reality, resources are specialized in nature and are not equally efficient in producing both goods, and goods are not homogeneous. Therefore, due to imperfect factor mobility and specialization of workers, so factors of production, the opportunity cost is increasing, meaning that as we produce more of one good successively, it will lead to more units being given up each time. And in this case, the PPC would be concave to the origin, meaning bowed outwards. And that's in all how we would approach this answer. So we have covered pretty much all the aspects of the answer. So we defined PPC, we made the diagrams. So there would be 2 marks for these 2 diagrams, and then the explanation. And then we answered the second half of it as well. Okay, whether in real world we would have equal opportunity cost every time or no. So that's how we are going to approach this question. Thank you very much.